She wasn't listed on the flight manifest. She wasn't cleared for takeoff. Hell, she wasn't even supposed to be near the cockpit that morning. But when the SOS call came from the mountains and everyone else hesitated, she stepped forward. Because sometimes the most dangerous missions belong to those who already know what it feels like to be left behind. Which country are you watching this story from? Drop it in the comments. This one's going to stay with you. Crescent Ridge Air Base sat like a sleeping animal beneath a bruised sky. The wind dragged ice through the hangars, whispering against the steel bones of the facility. Inside Hangar 4, it was warm, mechanically so. A dozen crew members moved in rhythm, checking hydraulics, replacing gauges, muttering over sensor diagnostics. Kayden moved differently. Not slower, not faster. Just differently. Her movements were deliberate, focused, as if each bolt she checked had history, as if she was building memory with every pass of her hand. Her name tag read S. Kayden. No wings, no ribbons, no stories. Just that name. "Hey, Ghost," one of the new recruits called from a bench. His voice tried for humor but landed awkwardly. She didn't look up. He laughed anyway. "You ever gonna stop babysitting the birds and fly one?" She clicked her pen, then made a note on a clipboard. No answer. No need. The older mechanics knew better. They didn't speak her name unless necessary. There were stories, half facts, the kind that floated in mess halls but never made it into reports. 2 years ago, a bird had gone down in a storm. There had been a mission, a warning ignored, a voice drowned by protocol, and a name buried in red tape. Kayden hadn't spoken much since. In the storage office behind the hangar, the air was dust and cold files. Kayden stepped inside with the familiarity of someone who had walked the same steps thousands of times. She filed a completed maintenance log and paused. Her eyes locked on a framed photo nailed unevenly to the far wall. A squadron, 6 pilots, gear on, sun in their eyes, grins like they didn't know what was coming. And just at the edge, partially cropped out, stood her. You wouldn't know it was Kayden unless you knew how she stood. Helmet under one arm, chin lifted, eyes unreadable. She looked at that photo like it owed her something. Then she walked away. The operations center buzzed with routine. Weather reports flashed across screens. A storm system was closing in from the east. Nothing unusual, but enough to ground anything that wasn't essential. Medevac operations suspended. Training flights canceled. All birds locked unless orders said otherwise. "Kayden, you got final diagnostics on Eagle 3? Called a sergeant through the intercom. She pressed the mic. Green across the board. "Manual report filed." Pause. "Copy that." They didn't ask more. Outside, snow drifted sideways, pulled by wind that moved like a threat. Near the lockers, she crossed paths with Lieutenant Haynes, young, flight certified, still naive enough to believe merit mattered more than politics. He nodded. "Heard what you did with the HUD recalibration. Cleanest read we've had all week." She glanced sideways. "Just doing my job. You ever think about flying again?" Her jaw ticked. "Not up to me." He looked at her then, really looked. Something shifted in his posture. "Well, if it ever is again, I'd fly with you." She didn't respond, not with words, but for the first time in weeks, her shoulders eased. At 1642, the emergency comms flared. "Mayday, this is Blackbird 2. We are going down. Grid 9 Echo. Rotor failure. 3 injured on board. 1 critical. Request immediate extraction." Silence in the command room. The storm was already punching into the peaks. "Grid 9? Echo was a death trap, no road access. Visibility, near 0. The commander frowned. "We wait. Conditions won't break until morning. We can't risk another bird." "What if they don't have until morning?" Someone asked quietly. No one answered. And then, "I'll go." The room turned. Kayden stood just inside the doorway. Flight jacket half-zipped, helmet already in hand. "You're not cleared. Neither is anyone else." The commander stepped forward. "You haven't flown in 2 years. I know that route. I logged it. I prepped the bird. I can get them." Someone scoffed. She pulled a key from around her neck. It was old, worn, engraved. Eagle 2. The room held its breath. The commander looked at her. "Long and hard. You get 30 minutes. If you're not in the air by then, it's off." She nodded once and walked out. The hangar floor thundered with urgency. Crew members scrambled around Eagle 2, pulling covers, yanking fuel lines, unlocking rotor brakes. The storm howled outside, a wall of white and wind pounding the roll-up doors. Kayden climbed into the cockpit like she was stepping into memory. Her hands moved across switches, her boots resting against familiar pedals. The smell of oil and old leather filled the cabin. Dust danced in the narrow sunbeams coming through the vents. She wiped the console gently with her glove like she was greeting an old friend. Mechanics shouted over the noise. The comms buzzed to life. Eagle 2, this is Tower. We've got 25 minutes before the window closes. Copy, lifting in 15, she replied. The timer had started. The base clock ticked louder with each minute. The weight of expectation settled onto her shoulders like frost. Inside Eagle 2, the dash blinked to life. Systems online. Engine spin up humming like an old war song. The vibrations coursed through her spine. Altitude sensors calibrated, she muttered. HUD clean. Rotor sync holding. The co-pilot seat sat empty. No one had volunteered. They said it wasn't safe. They said she was risking everything. But they didn't understand. She had nothing left to risk. Kayden didn't care. She had flown solo before. In worse through worse. The engine screamed to full power, rotors slicing air like blades. Eagle 2 lifted into the storm. Inside the tower, the commander leaned forward, eyes fixed on her telemetry. Rain streaked the glass of the control room. She's airborne, someone whispered. God help her, someone else added. But the commander said nothing. He just nodded slowly. The world outside vanished in gray. Clouds engulfed Eagle 2, visibility near zero. Every gust shoved the frame sideways. But Kayden held steady. Muscles braced, breaths even. She flew by instruments, by instinct, by memory. Grid 9 Echo was a 23-minute flight in good conditions. She didn't have good conditions. Every 5 seconds she adjusted for drift. Every minute she cross-checked terrain maps burned into her brain. Every 5 miles she whispered to the storm, "Not today." Lightning crackled to the east. Her eyes tracked it without blinking. An alarm blipped softly on her dash. Icing built up. She flicked on the heating coils and leaned forward, squinting through frozen blur. The mountain range ahead was a jagged memory from another life, one she had failed, one she refused to fail again. Blackbird 2, this is Eagle 2, come in, static. She repeated again and again. Finally, a broken voice. Eagle 2, critical! Blood loss. Location confirmed. Flares ready. She angled lower. The peaks punched through the clouds like jagged teeth. She dropped altitude fast, riding the pressure pockets down to the valley. Then she saw it. A dying orange flare waving in circles below. Blackbird 2 was torn open, listing sideways on a slope. One rotor gone, smoke bleeding into wind. 3 figures moved near the wreckage. Kayden whispered, "Hang on." She pulled back hard, balancing throttle and pitch. No proper landing site. Just rock, ice, and death. She remembered another crash site. Another bird on a ridge. She blinked it away. "Not this time," she growled. The landing was a miracle. One skid touched rock. The other hovered. Snow ripped sideways across the scene like war film static. Kayden didn't waste time. She jumped down into the wind. One soldier met her, pale, bleeding, but standing. "He's not going to make it unless we move now." They loaded the wounded, 2 conscious, 1 barely breathing. The one on the stretcher groaned once. She glanced at the field dressing. "Too much red." She shouted into her comms, "Package secured. Lifting now." As she rose, a gust slammed into the tail. The bird spun. Kayden growled through clenched teeth, corrected pitch, counter-rotated, and Eagle 2 stabilized. "You're not dying today," she told the controls. The wounded soldier's hand clutched the webbing beside him. He wasn't awake, but his pulse still flickered. She pulled back, cutting between 2 ridges, eyes narrowing. No margin for error. This wasn't just a mission. It was a reckoning. The storm didn't ease up, not even a little. Eagle 2 fought through it like a wounded bird trying to outrun a predator. Every gust rattled the cabin. Every turn came with the risk of being slammed into the peaks. Wind slammed into the sides of the chopper like invisible hammers. Ice gathered on the edges of the canopy despite the heaters. Each second demanded another calculation. Another muscle memory born of hours she wasn't supposed to have spent in this seat. Inside, the wounded soldier's breath came in shallow rattles. The other 2 held onto the straps with knuckles pale and bloodied. One of them, a corporal named Mason, kept whispering a prayer under his breath. The third man's eyes never left Kayden, like watching her was the only thing keeping him grounded. Kayden kept her eyes on the altimeter, then the fuel, then the RPM, then the sky. She was flying blind in a memory, one that had ended with fire. But this time she was writing the ending. "Base, this is Eagle 2, we are inbound. 30 out. Medical critical. Advice status." The comms fizzed. Then, "Eagle 2, base reads you. Pad is clear. Mid-team's on standby. Stay with us. The voice wasn't protocol. It was hope. It was belief, reborn in static. Lightning cracked to the west. A deep rumble rolled through the valley. Kayden dropped low, hugging the mountain curves. Visibility was near zero. Trees emerged from the mist like ghosts. Rocks jutted out like hidden blades. The wind shifted direction without warning. But she knew these lines. She'd mapped this terrain 100 times in simulations, 1,000 in her head. Then she saw it. A shadow, bigger than it should be. Another chopper? No. A cliff. A sheer vertical face where the map said there should be room. Altitude drop. Pulling left, she muttered. She skimmed the ridge with inches to spare. Trees blurred below. Snow burst off the branches in waves. The helicopter tilted, its rotors brushing turbulence in unpredictable pockets. An alarm went off, ice accumulation. She toggled the anti-ice system and adjusted pitch. The base was still 20 miles out. She tapped the gauges. Come on, girl, hold, don't quit on me now. One of the soldiers groaned behind her. Suddenly, a gust grabbed the tail. Eagle 2 shuddered hard. The controls screamed. The HUD blinked red. Gyroscopic misalignment. For a moment, she wasn't in the cockpit. She was back there. The other crash. The night she lost her wings. She saw the faces. The smoke. The look in the commander's eyes.
The tribunal?
The silence. She'd tried to warn them. Told them the terrain was unstable. Told them not to fly. They flew anyway. And she paid the price. And then, a voice, real, now. You still with us, Eagle 2? She blinked, focused. Still flying, she said. She leveled out, checked the vitals on the stretcher behind her. The wounded soldier was fading. His chest rose only slightly. The lights of Crescent Ridge Air Base pierced through the mist like salvation, blinking red and white like stars falling to earth. The tower gave clearance. Kayden angled the bird in hard, fighting wind until the last second. She took a breath. A deep one. Let it out slow. Eagle 2 touched down. Not a scrape. Not a stutter. As the rotors slowed, medics swarmed. The doors yanked open. The stretcher rolled. The soldier groaned once. Still alive, the other two limped out with help. Covered in frost and blood and silence, one turned back and gave her a look. Not thanks. Something deeper. Recognition. Acknowledgement. She'd done what others wouldn't. Back in the operations room, no one spoke. Not at first. They watched her telemetry fade, then reappear, then stop. Home. The commander looked around, slowly, thoughtfully, then said, she brought them home. Not loud, not for effect. Just truth. He walked out. Not another word. Back in the hangar, Kayden stayed in the cockpit, hands still on the controls. Breathing slowing. Her knuckles were raw. Her back ached. Her flight suit soaked in sweat. Then she exhaled and stepped out into the storm. It didn't matter that she wasn't on the manifest. It didn't matter that the wings on her chest weren't stitched. She had flown. She had returned. She had saved them. She had reminded the sky who she was. Inside the operations center, the storm hadn't faded, but the voices had. Everyone was watching Kayden, some openly, some from the corners. The video feed from Eagle 2 had already made its rounds. Grainy, intermittent, but unmistakable. The girl who wasn't supposed to fly had flown through hell and brought 3 men back alive. The base commander stood at the head of the conference room table. Hands braced, eyes locked. You disobeyed direct grounding orders, he said. Kayden stood at attention, drenched and silent. You also saved lives. A beat. Then another. Then he stepped forward and placed something on the table. A flight log. Her name. Signed. Welcome back. No applause, no nods. Just quiet respect. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Later that night, she returned to her bunk. The barracks were quiet. Just the hum of the heater and the wind scratching against the windows. She opened her locker. Same gear, same folded uniform, same jacket, creased at the shoulders, worn at the cuffs. She pulled it out, laid it on the bed. Then from her drawer, a small velvet box. Inside, a pair of pilot wings. Not new, not issued. Old. They had been hers once. Stripped after the inquiry. Buried in silence. She held them for a moment, ran her thumb over the edges, then pinned them back on. Not for ceremony. For truth. The next morning, the hangar smelled like jet fuel and frost. Haynes found her in the diagnostics bay, running systems on Eagle 2. You broke 6 rules yesterday. She didn't look up. And you made half a dozen pilots rethink what this job means. Still silence. Then softly, they're talking about reinstatement. Full flight status. You'd be back in rotation. Maybe more. Doesn't change anything, she said. Doesn't have to. He paused. I'd still fly with you. Any day. She glanced over. A flicker of something unreadable crossed her face. Copy that. That afternoon, in a small closed-door ceremony, the commander handed her official reinstatement papers. No press, no cameras. Just the people who mattered. The medics she'd rescued. A few pilots. A few quiet nods. She signed the documents, slipped them into her jacket, and walked out without a word. But something followed her out that hadn't been there before. Eyes. Respect. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. Kayden was flying again. Not rescue missions. Not yet, but runs. Training flights. Supply drops. High-altitude test maneuvers. Each one logged. Each one perfect. Her name reappeared on flight manifests. Her wings were no longer whispers. They were worn, visible, earned. The storm had long passed, but its echoes stayed. In the halls, in the air, in the way people stood when Kayden walked by. Some still whispered, but the whispers had changed. They weren't about a mistake anymore. They were about what it meant to take flight when no one asked you to. In the hangar, Kayden stood beside a younger crew member who was fumbling with a diagnostics board. You're feeding the voltage too early, she said without looking up. He corrected it. The system blinked green. Thanks. She nodded, already turning back to her own tasks. He paused. They said you shouldn't have been blamed for that crash. That you warned them. She didn't stop moving. Warnings only work if someone listens. A long silence stretched between them. Still, you stayed. Someone had to. That evening, a base-wide message flashed through the comm lines. An official commendation for Flight Sergeant Kayden for valor in crisis, for operational excellence, for leadership in absence of command. It was the kind of award that came with brass signatures and formal wording. But on the flight line, what mattered more was this. Pilots nodded. Mechanics stood straighter. And when she passed, people didn't just see a tech anymore. They saw what it meant to keep going. 3 weeks later, she flew a logistics drop. Same bird. Same sky. Different weight in her chest. The pass-through Grid 9 echo was silent. The mountain still bore the scars, blackened rock, fractured tree lines. She hovered for a moment, not to linger, but to mark it. To remind herself, this is where it broke. This is where I flew anyway. Back in Hangar 4, a new photo was framed and hung beside the old one. This one wasn't cropped. It wasn't faded. 6 pilots, 1 technician in flight gear, a silver-winged woman at the center. The plaque beneath it read, Flight Sergeant Kayden. Cleared for duty. Courage is contagious. Have you ever known someone who wasn't supposed to lead but did anyway? Tell us their story in the comments. And if stories like this inspire you, hit that subscribe button. Because sometimes, sky belongs to those who never stopped looking up.